Good evening and welcome to the Sunset Park podcast. I am your host, Rob Aguilar. On today's episode of the live stream, we are joined by Victor Swinton. Victor is a longtime Sunset Park resident who is now running to represent the district at the city council level. But before we get started, I would like to remind you to please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can find this over at sunsetparkyoutube.com. Now, Victor, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, sir. Hey, I want to thank you for having me. I think outlet to the
Now, Victor, I know your family because we were neighbors on 56th Street. I was at 374, and you were at the building in front of us. Now, for those of tell our listeners and viewers how long you've lived in Sunset Park.
Oh wow, we came to Sunset Park in 1969. We were. I was born down in Fort Greene. We our residence was in Bed-Stuy. We got burned out of there. We were placed in a hotel for a little while, and then we found residence here on 56th Street in 1969.
Wow, 1969. Yeah, so that was a few years. I was born in 73, and then basically lived on 56th Street ever since then. And it was a great block. It was a very diverse block. I think that people always talk about New York City being a very diverse city, but it's sometimes it's a little bit of a cliche. But 56th Street was truly a very diverse block. I remember we had Puerto Rican kids, we had Irish kids, and kids from everywhere. And I think at that point, would you say your family was the only black family on the block? I think, right?
We were the only black family on the block. I want to say mid 70s, maybe, because another black family moved on the second floor, but they weren't here that long. So there was another black family on the second floor, but they wasn't here that long. So maybe early 70s they might have left. But definitely in the neighborhood, I could tell you about two other black families. They lived on 54th Street between Second and Third. And that's really all I knew at the time, to be honest with you.
What was it like growing up in Sunset Park during those years?
I actually love Sunset Park. It's a big part of my heart. I think we were welcomed with open arms here. Um, I got to know a lot of my friends back then who are still my friend today. Uh, the neighbors and the families. It was almost like we were one, you know. So back then it was definitely a different time with neighbors looking out for neighbors. And I was so appreciative of it. So I love this neighborhood. The people in it are great. And it was fun. It was fun. It still is to today.
Now, is there, like, when you think about Sunset Park and you think about growing up through all those decades till now, is there a particular memory, or do you have like a favorite Sunset Park memory of growing up here during all these years?
You know, I'm a sports fanatic. So I thought I was going to be the next Hank Aaron in baseball. May he rest in peace. I just love the sport. So going to Sunset Park with my friends, having a catch, playing softball on the field, maybe a little baseball on the dirt. Um, just the sports aspect and the activities of the young kids playing together it was a time I would never forget. I would never forget that time.
And it was real, true diversity. I remember just thinking back to at least 56th Street between 3rd and 4th in particular. we were a very diverse group of kids. And people talk about New York City being a very diverse city, and it is. And I think that that particular block, specifically 56th Street between 3rd and 4th, was a real specific example of that true diversity in the neighborhood, and that we still kind of have today. It's still a very diverse neighborhood,
Hmm.
and I think growing up here was very rich in experiences. Right, not rich in money, because our families were working class families, but
Yes.
rich in experiences and everything that we lived through during that era. Part of it was the and some people have classified the 70s, even parts of the 80s, like the dangerous times in the neighborhood. But I never felt in any danger ever. Like, to me, our block was like, our block. And the minute you turn that corner on 4th Avenue, it was like home. It was like safe. There was a true sense of community.
Well, as you remember, there was the gang aspect of the community going on, but like you said, of 56th Street, it was dynamic. You had a Cuban family, the Irish family. There was even a Polish family. My family was African American, Spanish, Italian down the block. And what was so great about it was I actually got to go into all those homes, and they treated you like their own. You got to experience their food, their cultures a little bit. So in that aspect, it was very nice. It was very nice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. My dad was the super of that building, 374 56th Street. And in our building alone, we had a Polish family, we had an Irish family, and we had a Dominican family, a Cuban family. And during the holidays, during Christmas specifically, it was like a party at our apartment. And in our living room,
Mm-hmm.
we had people from all over the world,
Uh,
just hanging out, having a good time, eating, drinking, dancing. And it was a really interesting time, a time that or a childhood that I would never ever change for anything in the world, because it was a really rich upbringing. And
yes.
all these years here now, now you're decided to run for city council. How did that come about?
It came about. I want to say maybe about 10 years ago. Um, I wanted to get involved in the community. So I put an application in to join the community board. Um, of course, I got denied, and that I'm telling you, usually things don't bother me. That kind of actually broke my heart that I was denied. Um, so I kept going to some meetings. Actually, I was a little turned off. I'm like, I'm not going back to meetings, but I said, let me go to some meetings. Um, then I applied again, and I got it 7 years later. And to be honest with you, to sit at these meetings, and it's almost like having the pulse of the community there, because you hear every aspect of what's going on, whether it's with parks, the transportation, land use, public safety, sanitation, and just to get that information to understand your neighborhood even more, um, was powerful to me. So in doing that, and engaging and getting more involved with the aspect of being on the community board, um, I started seeing things change a lot in the city. I really did. Whether it's come to public safety, affordable housing, um, and things of that nature. And I'm like, I think our government is failing us. Um, and it's nice that I could talk about it, but I always want to be a guy who wants to be about it. So I decided, that I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, um, make that chair of the community district for 38, the voice of the people. It's Vic Swinton. It's nice, but it's got to be that seat. Got to be the voice of the people in this community. Um, there's a lot of complaints going on in the city, in this district, and it just has to get out there and be heard. And I want to be that person to let it be heard, but I also want the community to understand that when I go into City Hall, if you happen to elect me, I'm going there with your complaints, your answers to questions, and everything else. It's not just about what Victor Swinton wants. That's just not going to happen. That's just not how I operate.
Now, there's a lot of issues, a lot of concerns that the district has, and it's a large district. I think Sunset Park alone has close to 120, 130,000 residents,
Mm-hmm.
and then the district incorporates Red Hook and parts of other smaller neighborhoods. So, if you could think of a specific issue that you think needs the utmost attention should you become our next council member, like what is that top issue that you think needs to be addressed immediately?
The most I hear at these committee boards is affordable housing. Um, People are feeling that you're getting new folks coming into the neighborhood, the developments, the prices of houses going up, prices of rent going up, and people can't afford it. Um, and we have to do something about this affordable housing for this community. I think we're busting at the seams, and we have to do something. We have to get more affordable housing. And when I mean affordable housing, I mean real affordable housing, and definitely more units. If it has to be where the city build this housing, then they have to build it. Something has to be done in this city to loosen that tight belt when it comes to affordable housing in this district.
Yeah, gentrification is a real hot topic for this district, for this neighborhood, for Sunset Park specifically. And you can't talk about Sunset Park without talking about gentrification. Or whenever examples of gentrification are brought up, whenever there's a discussion about how the city in general is evolving, Sunset Park is always brought up as an example of aggressive gentrification and aggressive development. And there is a certain segment of the community that is like, yeah, this is great. We're getting all these new different types of stores. We're getting Industry City that's developing and growing. And some homeowners specifically, I've heard them say things like, well, this is great. This is going to increase the value of my property. But I think the downside to that is that um, along with rising costs of properties and things like that, there's a rising cost in taxes, and a lot of people don't realize that that is a big burden of home ownership. So along with that is the increase in rents as well. There's people that can't afford to live here any longer. There are people, I've heard many stories from neighbors where people are making a good living, um, but they couldn't afford to buy a house. It's just astronomical, the prices of real estate here. And a lot of that is sometimes inflated. Same thing with the rents. We'll have owners that, because they feel that there's new people coming into the neighborhood, they can raise the rents to crazy amounts. And I don't know if there's a way that we can slow that down. I don't know what plans we can put in place to slow that rising costs or to slow down gentrification, or even if we should slow it down or should we let it be. What do you think about gentrification when you hear that word being thrown
Well,
around?
I just think when it comes to gentrification, when you talk about, the problem I think sometimes here in this community is that people see, oh, I bought my house for a certain amount and now I'm getting 5 times that amount, and some of them will take that monies and leave when other people come in, and that's where things will start changing in the community. I don't want to and maybe this is not politically correct to say, but I don't want to lose the fabric of this community either. Um, you want to make sure that people in this community are able to afford rents, housing. Listen, I think I did very well for myself. After I got my job with the city, and I don't think I could afford a house in the city, in this district. So we have to do something to slow that down a little bit. Um, Maybe allow try to get some kind of programs or some kind of grants or something to allow the people who are here already and having problems with getting homes, help them get into these homes somehow. And 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 we have to work hard on, let's take care of the folks here, um before we really start digging on the outside. I think we have a big issue here. I hate to hear people are almost, their families almost like tripled up so they could afford the rent. They really don't have the space in the house to live, to move around. And we have to do, and I think that's the job of government, to help those folks who are really in need to get affordable housing in this district.
Yeah, definitely housing is a top priority, and it kind of ties into a lot of other issues, right? That go hand in hand. Let's take, for example, this pandemic that we're going through right now. I think that the inequalities that maybe part of it are caused by gentrification. Um, the pandemic really exposed the inequalities that we kind of knew were always there, but now they're kind of like out in front for all of us to see. And a lot of our community neighbor, or a lot of our neighbors, are immigrants who maybe
Hmm.
did not qualify for stimulus COVID relief money, and they're struggling as it was before the pandemic to pay for the rising cost of rent. And now a lot of them are out of work since March. I know neighbors that haven't worked since March because either their companies shut down or went out of business, or they just can't afford to have them back on until we're done with this pandemic and we finally conquer it and move on. But what are your thoughts on being able to help the immigrant community? That's a big part of this fabric of Sunset Park, like you said before.
I think this is twofold. I think we have to think about the residents as well as the owners. My personal feeling, we're kicking the can down the road. We keep putting a date on a date where a landlord could go to court and they evict somebody. And if you haven't paid your rent for a year and they want you to catch up in a certain amount of time, that's going to be a problem. That family probably will have to get up and move out. And the next family that move in, that landlord's going to try to recoup his monies by raising the rent. I think that we have to, in this, whether it's the federal government, state, and the city, we have to do something where we forego the rent and do some kind of package for the landlords, so they don't suffer as much. Um, if we have to do it in stages, then let's do it in stages. But we have to take care of both entities. It's I just think when they lift this, when we come out of this pandemic and they lift it, and now, okay, the landlords could do what they want. We're going to have a bigger problem when it comes to housing in this district. It may be in this whole city, to be honest with you.
Yeah, another topic that keeps coming up is the relationship between the community and our local precinct, where there's been incidents of uh, the police being extremely rough with our neighbors, and because of that, and everything that we saw last year, and now with people being able to record the police because everyone has cell phones, we see a lot more and more of this aggressive sometimes unprovoked aggression from the police and our community members, it started a movement of defund the police, right? And sometimes that phrase scares people. But what what do you think about when you hear the term defund the police, and do you support that movement, or what are your thoughts on that?
I do not support the fund of police. Um, I think we need reform. I've been a police officer for 36 years. I have a supervisor's role in the police department, and I think it starts there. People I work with know they're not going to get away with stuff that's inappropriate around me, and I think the supervisors on this job might have to take a little more proactive role in that. To make sure things like this don't happen. Um, I thought with the body cams and the way people are taking videos that things will change, and to hear that it's not, it's alarming to me. Um, but I we have to, and I'm also an adjunct professor at John Jay College, and I try to, because I to me, I'm on both sides. I'm a black man in America, and I'm a police officer. So I try to explain to these new kids who want to be police officers that you got to be respectful of the citizens of the city. First of all, we work for them, but you have to be respectful, because when you're out there in a street fight as a cop, and you can't get to your radio call for help, and you start hearing sirens, somebody in that neighborhood called for you, called to get you help. And you can't paint your brush for the whole community of some that don't do right. But I think the community needs to do the same. um, when it comes to police officers that are wrong. You paint the whole department. I think the department might have to do a better job to get rid of those folks. We might have to do better at screening when we're getting them on the job. But police officers in this city have to understand they work for the people. They got to be respectful of the people. And I would not tolerate anybody being disrespectful to my family or do it in front of me. So um, I think the funding of police is the wrong word, depending on how you say it. Could we get rid of some funds in this department and put it in other places? We probably could. We probably could do that with every agency. And I think that we need to do an overhaul of every agency, see what we have in the excess, and then take that money and put it into things like school, homelessness, mental illness, and affordable housing, things of that nature.
Yeah, and I want to follow up on two important points. But first, um, what what was it like, or what is it like, or is it difficult, right, to to be an officer of the law and be a person of color? Like, how does that mesh, right? Because a lot of us feel, right, as a person of color, some people say that they don't feel safe whenever an officer comes around them. And I can speak of personal experiences. Sometimes I'm driving down the road, and I see a patrol car just kind of come around me or behind me, and already in my mind, I'm feeling uneasy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the history. What's was it like, um, or what is it like being an officer of the law, and being a person of color, and how do you bridge the two together?
Rob. It's, to me, I don't think it's that hard, because of the person I am. When people see me in my uniform, I think they see the blue. When I'm out of the uniform, you know, everybody likes Vic. Vic's a down to earth guy. He's this guy. He's that guy. But when I'm in a uniform and there's certain situations, I get called all kind of names for certain people. But because of that, I still don't disrespect them. My thing is, you could call me whatever you want. Let's not touch each other. Um, I know I was talking to you earlier about a blue car. I'll tell you a quick story if I can.
Hmm.
That blue car. I was
Yeah,
driving. I was
it
driving
was
down
the
Fort.
nicest car on the block. I'll never forget that car. I remember that car, and it was like what the coolest car back then. I was a kid. I'm like, I want to have that car when I grow up.
I might have had the car for 2 weeks, so it was really shiny. And when the rain bounced off, it was really nice. So I'm driving down Fourth Avenue. I passed. It was pouring rain. I just came from a friend of mine's, I think his kid's birthday party. So I was dropping off some other friends at home. So I drive down 49th Street, and I see the police car waiting for the light on 49th Street and Fourth Avenue. And just like you, I said to myself, this guy's going to pull me over. He's going to pull me over. And why I thought that, black man with a nice car, maybe. So I pull up to 46th Street to drop my friend off. He lived between 46th, between 4th and 5th. The cop car pulls behind me, and he toots his siren. Now, I'm a police officer at this time. That's, to me, that's bad tactics. You have the person come up to you in the R&P, then to the police car, then you go to the car. So I just want to get home. So I walk back to him, and I show him my shield. I said, listen, I'm a police officer. He goes, oh, okay. But I had to ask the question, what did you stop me for? I wasn't speeding. I didn't go through a light. What did you stop me for? And his answer to me was, I never seen your car in the neighborhood before. I'm like, you're either a good cop, a great cop for recognizing every car in the neighborhood. And you know how busy Fourth Avenue is. So you got to be a great cop, or there was a little discrimination going on there. And I wish I could rewind that day, but it was raining so hard. I just wanted to get in my car and go home. But from what I know today, I would have stood out there and got soaked and had a conversation with this guy. And your that answer is ridiculous to me. And police officers have to be able to articulate themselves to people. Whenever I would stop somebody in the street, and then what are you stopping me for? I could articulate why I stopped them within the law. I would get a description over the radio. I would even let the individual listen to the description, and he'll say, "Yeah, well, they did describe me." But once you engage yourself like that, talking to the community and explain to them why you're doing what you're doing, I think that would alleviate a lot of the problems we have between community and policing. Because I'm telling you, we need each other in this city. We need each other, and for those cops or maybe those people in the community who don't believe that, I think that's a big mistake. I think that's a big mistake.
So, are you hopeful that that relationship between the community and and the police department can change? And if so, how do we change that? Right? It seems like it's been deep rooted for such a long time, where people are genuinely mistrust. They mistrust the police.
It's gonna be hard work. I think there's a lot going into making the change now, where the community now could get to pick who's the commanding officer, but we have to change the way some cops think out there in the street. I mean, I can't sit here and say that every cop's on the up and up. We have to change the way we look at people in black and brown communities. Um, it just has to change. I tell you, the best time I seen communications between the public and the police was the worst time in this country, and that was 9/11. We communicated with each other so well that I'm like, why can't this happen all the time? We had to have such a catastrophe in this country that now we could talk to each other like we're human beings. And and so I know it could happen. I know it could happen. We just have to we're gonna have to change the mindset of a lot of people on both sides of the spectrum, especially the police, because they are the ones getting paid to police the community.
Now, you said you're also an adjunct professor at John Jay. Um, which of the two do you like best? Do you like being an officer of the law, or being a professor? Like, is there one that you like more than the
I
other?
I tell you, I love both my jobs. But I like the teaching part maybe a little more. And that's because I could sit there and have dialogue with young folks on, and they have a lot of questions when it comes to policing and why police do the things they do, and I try to explain it to them. Um, and it's fulfilling that when we leave the class, maybe it's not that class or the next class, but down 3 or 4 classes later, that we have an understanding. Like, I understand what you're talking about. I know how they are. I know what to do if I'm disrespected. I know how to act, and it's just to give that information to people is outstanding to me.
Now we have a question from a viewer, and I'm gonna post it. I think they misspelled the word "does," but it says, "How does he feel?" I guess meaning you. How do you feel about community councils now having a say in who runs the precinct? I'm not too familiar with that, but maybe you can.
Yeah,
Um,
what's happening now is the police commissioner is gonna identify maybe 4 or 5 captains or above for precincts, and the precinct council is going to get to interview the supervisors to see who best fits the community. Um, I don't think it's a bad idea, but my only problem looking from inside out is that how long is this interview process? Is it just going to be like the guy's coming in for 2 hours? You're going to talk to him and determine that's the guy. I think there has to be um, a little more. It has to be that check has to be extensive. Um, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, I just think that it has to be more than just come to a community council meeting, tell me who you are, and then and then we'll it's okay. Because listen, even here, like these candidates in the city council, the mayor's race, they're trying to sell themselves. So we have to ensure that we ask the right questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions, and also we have to ensure that we have more time to interview the individuals.
so now,
I think it's a good idea. I think it's good engagement with the community. I think it's great.
being that you have a long, extensive career with the NYPD, and if you were to become our next council member, would it be a difficult transition for you to, let's say, for example, have to call out a situation where, let's say there's video of an officer doing something, uh, being too aggressive with, or being overly aggressive with a community member? Could you do you feel that you would be able to kind of call it out and say, hey, well, that was probably inappropriate, or that shouldn't have been done, or is that something that you think you could do with ease?
I don't think it would be a problem. I have done it before. I used to be the president of the Guardians Association in the police department. It's a fraternal group of African Americans officers, and whenever there was a situation where I felt a African American officer was treated unfairly, or maybe even some action in the community, I would go up to the commissioner's office and sit down and talk to him about that situation. Um, the commissioner at the time, I think he was a little more than somewhat receptive to what I was saying, because I would see some action taken. But I wouldn't have a problem if someone's doing something they're not supposed to be doing. I don't have a problem calling them out at all. Not at all.
Awesome.
Not at all.
Now, changing gears a little bit,
Hmm.
you've had a long, extensive career in law enforcement. You also teach, and out of all the different accomplishments that you've had throughout your life, could you pinpoint to one specific accomplishment that you are the most proud of?
Wow. Wow, that's a good one.
Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot,
No,
or
no, because I'm there's a few things. I was happy um, when I got promoted to lieutenant, um, that my mother and my grandmother, may she rest in peace, was actually available to come to headquarters and see me get promoted. It was because when I got promoted sergeant, none of them came, and it was a great thing. Um, so my mother right now is very ill. Um, so for her to witness things like that, it was great. When I used to play baseball, um, to get away from the professional aspect of it. When I used to play baseball, at one point my mother and father used to work opposite each other. So we used to have one parent home at a time. And my mother kind of got ill at work, so she stopped working. And what used to impress me a lot, this even happened to my brother Jermaine, was when my mother and father would come to our games and sit there. And they came to every game, sit there and watch us play baseball. I was in heaven when they showed up every to all my games.
Wow, that's awesome. And we wish your mom the best, and I hope that
Thank you. I
she
appreciate
she
that.
she she does well soon, and gets healthy again. Now we have a full race, right? There's a lot of
Hmm.
people running for the seat in this district. Um, if if you could tell us, right, why we should vote for you. Um, yeah, tell us why we should vote for
Listen, I'm
Victor Swinton.
this is for me. This is more. This race is for the community. Um, I think that we need someone in the council who's going to be very vocal on issues in this community. Someone that we need to gather folks in this community, because I see on a lot of occasions where when the community comes as one, um, people seem to listen, and I think I could be that person. Um, we need a lot of things here in Sunset Park. I see sometimes I just see them throw things in here, and you'll be like, wow, man, we got another uh, homeless shelter. And I don't have nothing against the homeless, but we got another homeless shelter where maybe we could have made that affordable housing, for the people in the community. So um, the way we fought for knocking down Industry City, the way the community came together for that, I think that's what we need to get things here in Sunset Park, and I think I could do that.
Now, you brought up Industry City and the rezoning and that whole situation. What were your thoughts on that? Were you for the rezoning, or were you for against the rezoning?
I was against it, and one reason I was against it, I there was no transparency to me. Um, I think the chair of the land use committee did a very good job on trying to get the information out in a short time. Um, but just I remember they gave us some kind of proposal, and they're like, we got to do this in 60 days or 30 days. What I'm like, wait a minute, when did this come? They've been talking about this for a while, and now we're just getting this, and now we got to rush through it. Um, I just think that transparency wasn't real to me. Um,
Mhm.
there was a lot of community engagement. Don't get me wrong. I went to some of those meetings, and those meetings were, uh, I don't want to say hostile, but they were very,
They
uh,
were heated and passionate,
they were
right?
heated. They were heated with passion, exactly, and
Yeah.
and that was a good thing. That was a good thing. But I think that when it comes to development in this community, we need to have better dialogue, more communication, more community input. Um, and I think that will go a long way with how we shape the community, because the developers coming in really don't know what the community wants in here, and they need to engage the community and give them time, and be transparent with your information, um, when it comes to your development, so the community can make a wise and intelligent decision on what you want to do here.
Yeah, and I think during that whole process, Industry City was promoting and promising a lot of things that I think the community could have received without Industry City, right?
Hmm.
We don't. Industry City, I think, is not the savior of Sunset Park,
No.
right? There's a lot of programs outside of Industry City that we can go and get at the city level, right? We don't need Industry City to bring us schools. We don't need Industry City for affordable housing. There should be, if there isn't, programs available for us to be able to bring the things that the community needs without having to rely on this giant development, who might not have the best interest of the community in mind, and they're only looking out for their investors
Hmm.
and for making money. But yeah, so in closing, right, and I guess to loosen up things, are you familiar with the other candidates running
Yeah.
for office?
Yes, some of them are on the community board. Yes, serve on the community
Now,
board.
I asked this of all the other candidates, if Victor wasn't running and he had to pick one of the other guys running, one of the other candidates running, uh, who would who would Victor
That
support?
that is a good question. I'm going to say this. It, I think they all are great. I hear their ideas. Some I agree with, some I don't. Um, I haven't heard this. There's some other candidates that are listed that I really haven't heard their platform, so it might not be fair to pick one. But I truly believe that just listening to some platforms of the other candidates, um, I think this district will be represented well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is promising, right? I think everyone running is well qualified, has the community's best interest. Um, you're a longtime resident, who grew up here, who is still in the community, and you're vested in the community. So I think that we're lucky in that sense that everyone who is running has the best interest in mind of the community. And I think that regardless
Yes.
of who wins, after this is all over, we're all going to continue to work together to make Sunset Park and this district the best possible district for our families, for our friends, and for our neighbors. And it's not like if someone wins, we're like, oh my gosh, there goes the neighborhood. Everyone running is great, and they have a track record of doing community work and being on the community board and being an advocate for the community. So thank you for stepping up and putting your name in the hat. I think that it takes a lot of guts, a lot of work to say, hey, I want to run and represent our district, and for that, I thank you for stepping up to the plate. And
Thank you very much.
it was a pleasure catching up with you. And
Yes,
before we
sir.
went on air, we were talking about growing up on 56th Street and all the
Yes.
different things that we used to do back then. Um,
Hmm.
and thank you so much for taking the time. As we get closer to the election, I'd love to have you back and talk about how the campaign is going, and catch up again.
I, I I will be back anytime you need me. I thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it so much. You don't know.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you so much. And I'd like to remind the viewers to please again subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can go over to sunsetparkyoutube.com. We will be back next week with another episode, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a great night, everyone.